Some of the biggest songs of the 1970s came from bands that most people couldn't name today if their life depended on it. They topped the charts, dominated the radio for a few months, and then simply disappeared, often for reasons far stranger than anyone realized at the time. So today, we're counting down 1970s music. 15 bands that vanished without a trace. Number 15, The First Class.
Beach baby, give me your hand, give me something.
Released in 1974, Beach Baby was written by British songwriter John Carter and his wife Jill Shakespeare, and it reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 that summer. The strange part is that The First Class never actually existed as a real band when the song was recorded. Carter assembled a handful of session musicians, including veteran session singer Tony Burrows, purely to record the track at Lansdowne Studios in London, with no intention of ever touring or performing live. Once the song became a hit, the record label desperately wanted a touring act to promote it, but Carter and Burrows refused to go on the road, preferring studio work over live performance.
Beach baby, there are the sand from July to the...
A completely different set of musicians, none of whom had played on the actual recording, was hired to portray The First Class in concerts and television appearances. The illusion held together just long enough to promote the song. And once interest faded, the fabricated version of the band quietly dissolved, leaving behind a hit record credited to a group of people who were never really a band to begin with. Carter and Burrows would later revive the project once more in 1976 for a follow-up album, again ruling out any personal appearances, interviews, or touring, treating the entire enterprise strictly as a studio-only venture from start to finish. Burrows had actually built a career doing exactly this kind of work, having previously sung lead on hits credited to other short-lived studio acts like Edison Lighthouse and White Plains, none of which existed as real touring bands either.
Beach baby, give me your hand, give me something.
Number 14, Player.
Baby, come back. Baby, come.
This Los Angeles-based band, formed in 1977 by English-born singer Peter Beckett and American musician J.C. Crowley, released Baby Come Back that same year, a song the two had written independently after both had recently gone through breakups. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1978, staying there for 3 consecutive weeks and giving the newly formed band an immediate commercial breakthrough with their very first single. A follow-up song, This Time I'm In It For Love, also reached the top 10 shortly afterward, suggesting the band might sustain a longer run of hits. That momentum didn't continue, however, and after extensive touring, Crowley eventually left the group to return to his roots in country music, while the remaining members continued on with diminishing commercial results.
Baby, come back. You can blame it all.
By the early 1980s, after moving from RSO Records to Casablanca Records, Player had largely faded from mainstream radio, unable to recapture the massive success of their debut single. The band that had opened its career with an immediate chart-topping hit found itself unable to build any lasting momentum, becoming another example of a group whose commercial peak arrived right at the very beginning of their career, rather than growing from a slower, more sustained rise. The band's rapid ascent had actually been unusual even at the time, since Beckett and Crowley wrote Baby Come Back, and quickly built an entire band and record deal around it before the members had ever played a live show together, meaning the group's identity was shaped almost entirely by that single song from the very start.
Baby, come back. Baby, come.
Number 13, Pilot.
It's magic.
This Scottish band released Magic in 1974, a bright melodic pop song that became a surprise hit in the United States, reaching number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 that year. Formed by musicians David Payton and Billy Lyle, who had both previously played in the Bay City Rollers backing band, before that group's own rise to fame, Pilot achieved considerably more chart success in the UK than most American listeners realized, with several additional hits back home that never made a similar impact overseas.
It's magic. You know.
Despite Magic becoming a genuine American radio staple, the band was unable to translate that single success into any lasting presence on US charts, and by the later part of the decade, they had effectively disappeared from American airwaves entirely. Payton went on to build a substantial career as a highly sought-after session bassist, working with major artists including Kate Bush and Elton John throughout the years that followed. Lyle, meanwhile, continued working in music production before his death in 1989. The band itself quietly dissolved by the end of the 1970s, leaving Magic as the one song most American listeners could still recognize, largely unaware of the band's broader career or its members' more substantial contributions to music behind the scenes. Number 12. Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods. This Ohio-based group released Billy, Don't Be a Hero in 1974, a cover of a song originally recorded earlier that same year by the British band Paper Lace, telling the story of a soldier who dies in battle after ignoring his fiancée's plea to stay safe. The American version, led by singer Bo Donaldson, reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, outperforming the original British recording in the United States. The band managed a couple of modest follow-up hits over the next year, but none came close to matching the commercial impact of their signature song. As disco and other emerging genres began reshaping the pop charts in the mid to late 1970s, the group's earnest, string-laden pop sound quickly fell out of step with where popular music was heading. By the end of the decade, Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods had effectively disappeared from national radio, their run cut short by a shifting musical landscape that had little room left for their particular style. The band's story became a fairly common one for acts of that era, where a single massive hit was ultimately followed by a rapid and largely permanent decline in relevance. The band continued performing on the nostalgia circuit for years afterward, finding a modest, steady audience among listeners who remembered the song fondly, even after it had long since disappeared from mainstream radio playlists, a quieter second act far removed from the intense national attention the group had briefly experienced during 1974. Number 11. Blue Swede. This Swedish band released their cover of Hooked on a Feeling in 1974, adding a chanted vocal introduction that had actually originated from an earlier cover version by British producer Jonathan King, though Blue Swede's rendition became by far the more famous recording. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States, a rare feat for a Swedish act during that period, predating ABBA's American breakthrough by roughly a year. Blue Swede managed one more modest American hit afterward with a cover of Never My Love, but neither that song nor any of their later releases came close to matching the impact of their signature single. While the band continued recording and performing with reasonable success back home in Sweden throughout the rest of the decade, they essentially vanished from American radio and public awareness almost as quickly as they had arrived. Their brief moment at the top of the US charts became one of the more overlooked footnotes in 1970s pop history, remembered today mostly through the song's chanted opening, rather than through any awareness of the band that recorded it. Few American listeners who still recognize the song could name the group behind it. Back in Sweden, the band's individual members went on to reasonably successful careers in various corners of the country's music industry, with some moving into production and songwriting roles for other artists once Blue Swede's own run of hits eventually tapered off entirely by the end of the decade. Number 10. The Hughes Corporation. This vocal trio released Rock the Boat in 1974, a song that became one of the earliest tracks widely credited with bringing disco to the top of the mainstream American charts. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that summer, marking a significant commercial breakthrough for the emerging genre months before disco fully took hold of popular music. Despite that historic achievement, the Hughes Corporation struggled to replicate their success with any follow-up singles, and by the back half of the decade, they had largely disappeared from national radio entirely. The group continued releasing music into the later 1970s, but none of it managed to chart with anything close to the impact of their signature hit. Their disappearance is particularly notable given how significant their one big song turned out to be historically, effectively helping to open the door for the wave of disco acts that would dominate the charts just a couple of years later. Despite that lasting influence on the genre's rise, the trio itself never became a lasting commercial presence, fading out just as the sound they helped popularize was reaching its commercial peak. The trio continued performing for years on the strength of their one signature hit, particularly on nostalgia tours and revival shows built around the early disco era, even as their name faded from mainstream recognition among younger listeners who knew the song without ever learning who had actually recorded it. Number 9. Sugarloaf.
Green-eyed lady, lovely lady,
This Denver-based band first broke through in 1970 with Green-Eyed Lady, a moody, organ-driven single that reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became a staple of classic rock radio for years afterward. 4 years later, in 1974, the band scored a second hit with Don't Call Us, We'll Call You, a song about the band's own frustrating struggles to get radio airplay, notably including a hidden Morse code message spelling out the call letters of a Denver radio station that had rejected their earlier material. That song reached number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100, giving the band a second burst of national attention years after their debut hit. Despite 2 separate brushes with major chart success spaced years apart, Sugarloaf never managed to sustain any lasting commercial momentum between or after those 2 singles. By the later half of the 1970s, the band had faded from national radio entirely, their unusual gap between hits ultimately proving to be more of an anomaly than a sign of staying power. Today, most listeners who recognize either song have little awareness that both came from the same group. Bandleader Jerry Corbetta had actually enjoyed some earlier recognition performing with other Colorado area acts before forming Sugarloaf, and the band's willingness to poke fun at their own industry struggles in Don't Call Us, We'll Call You gave them a brief moment of goodwill from listeners who appreciated the joke, even if that goodwill never translated into any further lasting chart success.
Green-eyed lady, lovely lady.
Number 8. Silver Convention. This German disco group, built around producers Sylvester Levay and Michael Kunze, released Fly Robin Fly in 1975, a song built almost entirely around a 6-word repeated chorus that nonetheless became a massive international hit. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that November, making Silver Convention only the second German act ever to top the American singles chart, and it won a Grammy Award the following year. The group followed up with another hit, Get Up and Boogie, in 1976, this time featuring a settled lineup of vocalists performing publicly under the Silver Convention name after the song's initial studio recording. Despite that early momentum, including a Eurovision Song Contest entry called Telegram that same year, the group's commercial popularity faded quickly as the disco boom that had initially lifted them began shifting toward other sounds and acts. By the end of the decade, Silver Convention had effectively ceased to exist. Their run cut short after only a few years despite having genuinely helped shape the sound of early disco on both sides of the Atlantic. Their vocalists went on to pursue separate solo careers with only modest individual success. The original studio recording of Fly Robin Fly hadn't even featured a settled lineup of singers since Levay and Kunze assembled a rotating cast of session vocalists for the earliest sessions before eventually recruiting a more consistent trio to represent the group publicly once the song's massive success created demand for live appearances and television performances. Number 7. Looking Glass. This New Jersey band, formed by singer-songwriter Elliot Lurie and friends at Rutgers University in the late 1960s, released Brandy, You're a Fine Girl in 1972, a song reportedly inspired by a former girlfriend whose real name was actually Randy rather than Brandy. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that August and became a million-selling single, an enormous commercial peak for a band still relatively new to major label recording. Looking Glass managed one more top 40 hit the following year with Jimmy Loves Mary Ann, but neither that song nor anything else in their catalog approached the commercial impact of their debut hit. By 1974, Lurie left the band to pursue a solo career that ultimately found little commercial traction, and the remaining members regrouped under an entirely different name before eventually evolving into an unrelated hard rock act. Lurie later moved away from performing altogether, building a much longer and more successful career behind the scenes as a music supervisor for film and television productions. The band that had briefly dominated American radio in the summer of 1972 had entirely dissolved within just 2 years of their biggest success. Before finding fame, Looking Glass had spent years honing their sound playing frat parties in local bars throughout New Jersey, building a loyal regional following that eventually caught the attention of music executive Clive Davis, who signed them to Epic Records and helped position the band for the national breakthrough that Brandy ultimately delivered. Number 6. Stories. This American rock band released Brother Louie in 1973, an American cover of a song originally recorded that same year by the British group Hot Chocolate, dealing with the reactions of a man's family and friends to his interracial relationship. Story's version reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that August, becoming a significant commercial breakthrough for a band that had struggled to gain traction with their earlier releases. Despite the massive success of that single, internal tension within the group escalated quickly, and by 1974 the band had broken up entirely, unable to build on the momentum of their unexpected chart-topping hit. The rapid collapse came as a surprise to many industry observers, given how strong the song's commercial performance had been just months earlier. Lead singer Ian Lloyd went on to a modest solo career afterward, but neither he nor any other former member of Stories ever returned to that level of mainstream success again. The band's story remains a clear example of how quickly a group could rise to the very top of the charts and then completely disappear within the same calendar year, leaving behind only a single song that most listeners today have no idea came from a band that barely existed for a few years. Number 5. Ram Jam. This American rock band was formed in New York City in 1977 by producers Jerry Casanets and Jeffrey Katz, specifically around guitarist Bill Bartlett, who had previously recorded an earlier regional version of Black Betty with a different group called Starstruck. The re-recorded version, released under the Ram Jam name, reached number 18 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became a significant hit both in the United States and internationally. The song, based on a traditional folk tune associated with musician Lead Belly, drew public criticism from the NAACP and the Congress of Racial Equality, who called for a boycott, arguing the lyrics were disrespectful given the song's roots in African-American musical tradition. Despite the controversy failing to stop the song's commercial success, Ram Jam struggled to build any lasting career beyond that single hit, releasing just one additional album before disbanding entirely by 1978. The band's entire active period lasted barely 2 years, an unusually short run even by the standards of 1970s one-hit wonders. Because the band had essentially been assembled around one song, rather than built from an existing group with its own creative identity, there was little foundation left to sustain them once interest in that single recording began to fade. Several of the musicians involved, including Bartlett, continued working in music afterward in less visible roles, while the Ram Jam name itself was quietly retired, leaving behind a single, highly recognizable song that far outlasted the short-lived group credited with recording it. Number 4. New York City. This Philadelphia-based vocal group released I'm Doin' Fine Now in 1973, produced with the smooth, orchestrated Philly soul sound that Tom Bell had helped popularize with acts like the Spinners and the Stylistics. The song reached number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became a modest R&B radio staple that year, showcasing tight vocal harmonies typical of the era's soul groups. Despite the initial promise, the group struggled to find a consistent follow-up hit, and internal changes to the lineup made it difficult to maintain momentum in an increasingly competitive soul music market. By the mid-1970s, New York City had faded from national radio entirely, unable to replicate even the modest success of their one signature single. The group's story reflects how crowded the Philly soul scene had become by the early 1970s, with dozens of vocal groups competing for airtime using strikingly similar arrangements and production techniques. Without a distinctive enough sound to stand out from that wave of similar acts, New York City slipped quietly out of the spotlight within just a couple of years of their only real hit. The group had originally formed out of an earlier lineup with a different name, and several members had already spent years performing together in various configurations before finally landing a hit with Bell's polished production behind them. That long build-up made the swift disappearance afterward feel especially deflating, since the group had worked for years to finally break through only to lose momentum almost as quickly as they had found it. Number 3. Wing and a Prayer Fife and Drum Corps. Despite the name, this group, active from 1975 to 1978, had no fife players at all, and wasn't really a corps in any conventional sense either. It was assembled by musician and arranger Harold Wheeler, as a studio project built around a disco cover of the 1926 standard Babyface, featuring vocalists Linda November, Vivian Cherry, Arlene Martel, and Helen Miles. The single reached number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100 in December 1975, part of a broader trend of disco reworkings of old pop standards flooding the charts during that period. A follow-up disco version of the Beatles' Eleanor Rigby failed to generate similar interest the following year, and the project never found another commercial foothold. Because the entire act existed primarily as a studio vehicle for Wheeler's arrangements rather than a genuine performing group, there was little incentive or infrastructure to keep it going once the novelty of disco versions of old standards wore off. Within a few years, the name disappeared from record store shelves entirely, its brief run defined by one hit built around an old song and a name that promised instruments nobody involved ever actually played. Wheeler himself was a respected arranger and conductor who worked extensively in television and Broadway throughout his career, meaning the project was really just one small side venture in a much longer and more substantial professional life, spent largely away from the spotlight of pop stardom. Number 2. Wild Cherry. This Ohio-based band released Play That Funky Music in 1976, a song written by lead singer Rob Parisi after the group, originally a rock act, began shifting toward funk in response to requests from club audiences during their live shows. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 that September, becoming one of the biggest crossover hits of the year across both pop and R&B radio formats. Despite that massive success, Wild Cherry struggled to find a comparable follow-up hit, and the band's momentum slowed considerably within just a couple of years of their breakthrough single. Parisi eventually disbanded the group by the end of the decade, citing exhaustion from touring and a desire to step back from the music industry after the intense pressure that followed such a sudden and massive hit. He largely stepped out of the public eye for years afterward, occasionally resurfacing for interviews about the song's legacy, but never returning to sustained recording or touring. The band that had scored one of the most recognizable singles of the entire decade essentially disappeared from active music making entirely within just a few years of their unexpected rise to the top of the charts. Before writing the song, Parisi had reportedly grown tired of audiences repeatedly shouting requests for the band to play some funky music during their live rock sets, eventually deciding the joking request made a better song title than a source of ongoing frustration. Number 1. Stealers Wheel. This Scottish folk rock band, formed by songwriters Jerry Rafferty and Joe Egan, released Stuck in the Middle with You in 1973, a song produced by the legendary team of Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, and widely noted for its uncanny resemblance to Bob Dylan's vocal style and songwriting. It reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became the band's signature hit, along with strong chart performance in their native United Kingdom. Despite that early success, the band's lineup proved chronically unstable, and creative and business tensions between Rafferty and Egan escalated quickly, leading Rafferty to briefly quit the group entirely before eventually returning. Compounding the instability, legal disputes with their management team, triggered partly by Leiber and Stoller's own business troubles, prevented both Rafferty and Egan from recording any new music for roughly 3 years, effectively freezing the band's career at the height of their commercial relevance. By the time those disputes were finally resolved and their contractually obligated final album was released in 1975, the band had already ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. Rafferty went on to a successful solo career highlighted by his 1978 hit Baker Street, but Stealers Wheel itself never recovered from years lost entirely to legal battles, disappearing just as quickly and completely as their brief moment of fame had arrived.
Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Yes,
15 bands, 15 massive hits, and 15 stories of groups that rose fast and disappeared even faster, often for reasons far more complicated than anyone realized while their songs were still all over the radio. From legal battles and lineup collapses to bands that were never fully real to begin with, each story shows just how quickly a chart-topping moment could turn into a final chapter. If you enjoyed learning what really happened to these forgotten bands, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into music history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.